Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the CWL. We are so excited to have you here today. I get to welcome one of my colleagues. I want to call her my colleague. I feel like we are just connecting so much on so many levels. So super excited to have Dr. Victoria Garcia Wilburn back with us. If some of you have been following us, then you know that she was here at our Leadership Summit back in June. She gave us a little kind of pep talk, right, to get us really excited about telling our stories and what does it mean to be a woman leader, and specifically how do we bring our stories to true life. So excited to have her back. You're in for a great session. Just a little bit about Dr. Victoria Garcia Wilburn. She is a 2005 graduate from Boston University, and she earned her master's degree and a doctoral of health science from the University of Indianapolis. She holds a certificate in change leadership from Cornell University. She serves on the board of directors for the American Occupational Therapy Association, Hope Academy Recovery High School, and Reach for Youth. She has made history being the youngest first-gen Latina to be awarded the Fellow of American Occupational Therapy Association, her profession's highest honor of distinction. She also has been recognized as the Occupational Therapist of the Year in 2018 and was inducted into the Indiana Latino Leadership Circle in 2000. In 2001, she was awarded Boston University's Alumni Association Special Recognition Award for outstanding contributions to humanity beyond professional responsibility, named Outstanding Woman Leader from IUPUI's Office of Women, and was selected as part of the Hoosier Women Forward, a democratic grooming program for women, fourth class. She is committed to educational equity, public health, and running for a positive campaign for Indiana House District 32. You are in for an amazing treat. I'm so happy to have her here. Dr. Victoria Garcia Wilburn, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Misty, for that generous introduction. Sometimes I have to take a deep breath and think about all of the things that I've accomplished along the way. And I wonder, as we're starting this discussion today, about how often we actually get to sit down and think about all the things that we have accomplished. So just kudos to all of you for being on. I know your bios are just as impressive, and so I'm grateful to be on today with a room full of leaders. So I will go ahead and start sharing my screen and we can begin our time together. Okay, get myself set up here. Perfect. So the title of today's, I don't want to call it a lecture or a presentation, because I hope this is just a really informative time for us to be together and get to know us, each other a little bit better. I know that I'll certainly be disclosing personal aspects of myself today, but all parts of my journey that really lend me to the position to where I am today. So our title for today's discussion is Becoming You. Confidently thinking independently together. And I think that's such a secret ingredient, reminding that we don't have to conform to be great teams. The evidence that all shows to diversity and the robust elements that diversity has in productivity, in creation, in innovation, all of us coming as our authentic selves really leads to the best cohesion. So just so grateful for this time. So our agenda for today is you'll get to hear me read an excerpt from an edited volume that I'm working on. So you get a sneak peek. I'm very excited to share with you. Go on then to an introduction. We'll talk about goals, and then we'll take a look at our growth. We'll end with a summary of our today, and then I will love to field any Q&A that we might have time for today. So starting today off with a quote from Thomas Campbell, and this really resonates with me being a Latina, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month, Latinx Heritage Month to all the Hispanos, Latinos on today. It is a time where we can feel great sense of pride for our culture and the unique contributions that we bring to America. So in homage to that, I summon the spirit of my grandmother, mi abuela, and I love this quote. It says, "To live in hearts we leave behind is not to die." So we continue to say Josefina Garcia's name in remembrance of her memory and her spirit, and this excerpt to my first edited volume is in memory of her. I was told over and over again that education was the great equalizer. I was told this by my grandmother, who never in fact attended school, but from a few farmhouse lessons provided by the Catholic Charities. In fact, I didn't know she could hardly read until I picked a special birthday card for her at the ripe age of 10, and I begged her to read aloud the big, bold, colorful words on the inside. It was then I remember feeling puzzled that at 10, I had surpassed her educational level. Education then must be the great equalizer. I was told by my mother, who was forbidden from attending school past the 8th grade, who hailed from a deeply divided and segregated South Texas. The year I began the 9th grade, she continually told me how lucky I was to experience high school. Often she would share with me that she and many other Mexican Americans like her, the trauma-filled stories of oppression, beatings, and ridicule for continuing the customs and language of their native land. They did not cross the border crossed them. They were often considered a disruption to the white child's education. To attend high school was a privilege. To attend college was to fulfill a dream. To experience schooling past a 4-year degree was reserved for the lucky few. Education, the women in my life reminded me, was the great equalizer, and I would be the one to equalize us all. You can imagine the weight on my shoulders then to reach the highest level of education and to enter the academy. Entering the academy then, I concluded, must have meant that I made it, that now I was equal. But it wasn't so. This edited volume is a compilation of stories of women of color in the academy and their stories of struggle and strength, oppression, and overcoming. This volume provides a collection of truths detailing the experiences that were dismissed and often overlooked, and these are our stories. So I can't wait to share the full volume of that with you all later, but I wanted you to be the first to hear, because on the path to becoming confidently you, independently together, owning our stories is so important. So if you're with me for our last talk, we did talk about this concept that is probably very familiar to the Latinx community, this concept of ni de aquí y ni de allá. And what that really means is we're not really from here, but we're also not really from there. And that is, we were born in this country, we are rightful citizens of this country, but our hearts and spirits and our homage belong to a different country, one that we may never have journeyed or traveled, but the spirits and the intertwining of who we are often at this juxtaposition of our future. So I love this quote by, well, actually that's my own quote. So I'm gonna move to the next slide, but I'm prepping to say that the body and soul in that juxtaposition know what they need, and they will force you to listen, however painful it may be. So I'm sharing this picture of myself with you all today. And I would love for you to start with this picture of this little girl on the left. So she's wearing a sun visor and a sequency outfit and sunglasses and some jazz shoes. And I just want you to notice this little girl's posture. She is all dolled up to dance, you know, Americana, and be on a stage. So proud to be in dance class, but never quite finding that she can fit in. And so if you look at my posture, it's rounded. My shoulders are rounded inward. My pelvis is tilted outward, And really that positioning is to protect my heart. So even at the ripe age of, I'm guessing I was probably 9 or 10 in that picture, I knew that I had to protect my heart, that I couldn't fully, authentically be myself among my peers of American dancers. I felt uncomfortable because I definitely did not have the straight blonde hair that I had always wished for growing up in middle-class suburban Chicago. And I certainly, much to my mother's dismay, did not have the rhythm of a Latina. So I felt that I was disappointing some and not being the star of my jazz class, and not quite sure of myself. And then you see this picture of a girl, little girl on the right. I think in this picture, I was 11 or 12. And I had abandoned the American jazz class to enter and begin my journey as a folkloric dancer. And notice my posture in this picture. So my heritage, my lineage comes from Mexico. And I have never actually physically been to Mexico but once, when I journeyed across the border from a vacation time in South Padre and journeying across through that drive. And I see myself in this picture and I am standing tall and my posture is perfect and my arms are wide open and my heart is beaming to the world. And I really think it's in that picture that I'm starting to embrace who I am and my authenticity and uniqueness that might not quite be readily understood by the passerby, but knowing that I offer something unique, that I offer something different, and that my story means something, and for those that are like me and have a journey of being from another culture. So the groundwork, the independence thinking really starts inward. We all know that this work starts inward. And so that picture of my posture and this heart protection really comes from groundbreaking work in psychology. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the acclaimed psychologist Bessel van der Kolk. And he is instrumental in really bringing trauma-informed principles into modern day psychology and clinical practice. I am an occupational therapist by trade, and I am a mental and behavioral health occupational therapist at that. And so really understanding and embracing the principles of trauma resonated with me so very deeply. And so I love this quote from Bessel. He shares in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, this quote: "I discovered that my professional training, with its focus on understanding and insight, had largely ignored the relevance of the living, breathing body, the foundation of ourselves." So even as a child, my body was doing what it naturally was meant to do. We can either protect or we can own and shine. And so my urge, my call to all of us is, what are we protecting ourselves from and why? So I've made it kind of simplified this concept in 3 simple words. So we have to first address our wounds, we have to have a willingness, and then we have to approach life with wonder. And these are 3 concepts that are really applicable throughout our personal and professional lives. It is very rare that we can completely separate and have a boundary between our professional and personal lives, because we are who we are inherently, and the posture and pains of our body let us know when something is just not quite right. So who with me in the chat, when you've been sitting in a meeting and somebody maybe throws out a little microaggression there about a certain student or a certain employee, and you start to have a literal pain in your neck? We have these sayings in American culture because it is true. We cannot separate the mind, body, and spirit for who we are. Having a pit in our stomach, that's another saying that's very quite familiar. How many of us, when we are scared or uncertain of our next step in the workplace, do we start to feel nauseous or feelings of cramping in our stomachs, having a pit in our stomach, right? Not only a pain in our neck, but a pain in our back. So for men, it is very common for them to hold their emotional wounds physically in the smaller part of their back. So that is the pain in their back. So our body is telling us these physiological symptomatology of some greater inner wounds that we have to address in order to become as our authentic selves. So we have established then some goals. So how do we get there? How do we journey from what we carry and the past of our ancestors, our upbringing, all of those things? How do we turn all of that into something beautiful, something with purpose, something with inspiration? So we talked about attending to our wounds. And I love this quote from Brene Brown, because she says in her book, Dare to Lead, none of us leave childhood unscathed. So, you know, in our childhood, because we are dependent on the protection of adults, oftentimes things happen or occur to us that we look back and we think about maybe perhaps the trauma or the lesson, the hard lesson that we might have learned through that experience. And so those experiences do shape us in our current selves. We are silly or unfortunate to think that everything in childhood was peachy keen with roses on tops. That is not really always certain and always so. Those lessons that we've learned in childhood carry with us and really form to be our behaviors as adult, in particular our leadership styles and the way we interact with others. So really thinking about our own wounds and using our wounds as a catalyst for greater empathy among our students, greater empathy among our colleagues, and greater empathy for those members that serve our organizations, everyone from the janitor to our administrative personnel to our support systems. Greater empathy and understanding that we have all gone through a childhood. Seemingly, none of us came out of it unscathed, and we all bring portions of our personal life into our professional worlds. And instead of looking at that as a deficit, it can be a real great asset to the teams that we are part of. So with that greater empathy, we can then begin to flourish in understanding and concept of mindfulness. And if any of you practice yoga on a regular basis, you will be very familiar with this quote from Baron Baptiste, which says, "You are either now here or you are nowhere." Attention is hard to come by these days. In a fast-paced world where we're looking for immediate results, maximum productivity, and maximum innovation, the catalyst to all of that is actually downtime. How many of you are aware that the Apple Corporation actually encourages no technology use on one day a week? You can pick whatever day that week that is, but abandoning the use of technology actually sparks innovation. So setting aside practices in which we can intentionally attend to our mind, our wounds, the way that our body is physically feeling is all very, very important to who we are and what we bring to the workplace. And I'm really attentive to this in a leadership course that I teach here at Indiana University with our students. Often during the pandemic, it was very, very hard to have them turn in assignments on time, to always have their cameras on. And finally, we as a class decided to establish some ground rules for each other. How could we all feel respected, known, and heard during a very uncertain time? And so that was a very wonderful practice. So, you know, just going back to the basics of how do people feel heard and seen and valued. So establishing ground rules is just such a fantastic, tangible way to do that. Then once we've attended to our wounds, which plug for professional counseling. Now, in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, we do have quite a bit of stigma that needs to continue to be addressed when it comes to professional mental and behavioral health care. Mental and behavioral health care certainly always has a time and a place whenever one is struggling, both professionally and personally, and should be able to be accessed across all people groups. So a plug for professional mental and behavioral health care. In our wounds, then we also need to then move towards a willingness to pursue wellness in all areas in all areas of our lives. And pursuing wellness requires great intention to boundaries, intention to the yeses, intention to the no's, understanding what our capacities are by listening to our bodies and recognizing that we cannot continue to lead in deficits in our areas of rest, work, and sleep. We need a balance of all three. So pursue wellness relentlessly. I also have already mentioned this concept of mindfulness when thinking about our wounds, but building in pauses throughout our day. We don't have the luxury, like some European cultures, of a siesta, where we can spend 2 hours to decompress our afternoon, to refuel for the next half of our day. So we as Americans need to build in that pause time. And so I actually have that built into my calendar and reminders, and I definitely have that built into my classroom, where if I'm lecturing for more than 45 minutes, we all take a 5-minute break, and I tier it based on how many hours of lecture I'm doing. And so these pauses are necessary for our minds and our bodies. And so in my calendar, I set out pauses, 15-minute pauses, and the first 15 minutes of those pauses, I actually sit down, make sure both my feet are on the ground, ground myself, and close my eyes. I don't have to physically go to sleep, but just removing all of the stimulus around me centers me into purpose. It allows me then to be more creative on my projects and research and publications if I can build in pauses. And so no matter where we are in our workplace, the power of the pause is so, so vital. Pausing also when we speak. So thinking about our meetings and dialogues and communication with each other, always feeling the need to respond or thinking about your respond while the other person is speaking, really forcing a mindfulness practice in pausing and intently listening to what others are trying to say. Notice the tone of their voice. Notice their nonverbal communications, kind of their posture and the way they might be using their hands or not using their hands, or hands on hips, closed positions, or are they, fully surrendered in an outward position. So really being mindful. It is in that pause where we show across cultures great respect for one another and feeling valued and heard. And also a willingness to be playful. The reason why children are so resilient, we love to say that. Children are resilient. Children are so resilient. Children are resilient. Children are resilient because they have time to play. And as adults, we abolish play, thinking that we no longer need that reprieve from everyday reality. So I encourage all of us, no matter what our age is, to continue to play. And what does play look like as an adult? Play looks like going for a run, going for a walk. For some of you, it might be gaming. That play is great. Meeting for board games, that is play. Sitting on a beach reading a book is actually leisure and play. So you have to build in times for play. Many of you probably golf or play pickleball or tennis, rollerblade, roller skate, working out, making sure that these playful parts of your life also do serve a purpose in kind of pursuing that wellness relentlessly. So a pitch for play in that. And then lastly, having a goal to always stay in a mindset and state of wonder. And I think that, again, this is another concept that we lose in our transition from young adulthood to adulthood. Continue to imagine what is possible for your life. What is possible? Instead of thinking about opportunities that you have missed, start to shift your mindset to what continues to be possible. And maybe not always strategizing on how to get there or striving, but letting yourself dream, letting yourself think about those goals that you might have tucked away, in a corner somewhere, thinking that this time has passed or you're too old for this, or you don't have enough time for this. Well, what if all of a sudden there was time? And that's why I think there's been such a hesitancy to return to traditional work after COVID, because all of a sudden we were all faced with an abundance of time. And now the excuse of, I don't have enough time, was almost nearly non-existent. And many of us started startup ventures or really put a plan forward in reaching those next stretch goals, or had opportunity to network virtually. And so thinking about, if you could carve out time, what could be possible for you? And also recognizing that systems and structures start with self. So these commitments to yourself will better the collective. These healing of your wounds, these commitment to have a willingness and this positionality of always having wonder will then start to change systems. Systems don't change because they're not living, breathing, eating, feeding organisms. We are the system. So if one of us, one by one, can intercept the system, think about how much better we would be. It takes one person with enough courage to heal and to say yes, that will then empower the next person. So these first spaces feel heavy, and I'll talk about that here in a minute, but they really are such a great privilege. And of course, we all know the power of the word yet. So just because goals, desires, dreams have been delayed or deferred, there is still a power of yet. So train yourself to speak in such a way that says, I haven't yet, but I am on a pathway to mastery. I haven't yet achieved tenure, but I am on my way. So this anticipation of coming and newness and expectation really is our own self-endorphins. Oh, and so back to our work with Bessel. So this quote really just stood out to me in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. The greatest sources of our suffering are the lies we tell ourselves. So I think this self-defeating prophecy really begins in the mind. And that battlefield of our positive thoughts and positive thinking and healing and willingness and wonder have to be intentionally manifested for us to experience. Commit to not telling yourself lies. You know, I'm not rich enough. I don't have the money yet, but when I do, X, Y, and Z. So that positive self-talk, that positioning yourself in the positive rather than the negative. You're not a turtle, you're a giraffe. You were meant to see the world greatly, and your contributions to this country, to this earth, to our whole ecosystem, we're all interdependent on one another. So this little girl, she grew up, and no longer is she positioning herself, protecting her heart, not sure of who she is, guarding herself in a culture which she doesn't fully yet feel herself. She is arms wide open, embracing what the universe has for her and understanding that the wounds, willingness, and wonder are all part of the greater story. So in my intro, you heard that I am now exploring a brand new opportunity that I've never had before. In fact, I don't even quite have the experience, but I believe in the ingredients in which I was made up for just a time as now to serve as a public official. So I am currently running for a state representative position in Indiana here, and I am seeing myself. The second picture is me at a press conference in our state house, and I see myself already in that position. And no matter what happens on election day, win or lose, the journey has been worth it, because it has absolutely taught me what I value in life. And it has affirmed my presence in this planet, and has helped me pave the way for not just my children, but people of my community to step into spaces bravely themselves. And so I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I would be the first woman of color elected to this new House District 32. So I encourage you to focus on your fierce, focus on your fierceness. So in attending to the wounds, the willingness, and the wonder We don't have to pass on those generational traumas of believing sayings, myths, negativisms about ourselves. I am grooming 3 amazing children who are fierce. And so I want to just have us focus on just a minute of these beautiful pictures of my children in the wonderment of who they are and in their courage to play. And so this is my oldest, Isabella. And if you can see, her back muscles are entirely too big for a child her age, but she is just incredibly fierce, and she is incredibly brave, and she is an incredible center of herself. She knows who she is as a young woman, and she is not afraid to take on that rope and get across the other side of the lake. I would have been way too scared to do that as a child for a variety of reasons, but I'm so thankful that I'm grooming brave children. The second picture is of my daughter, Anya, and she is playfully doing a handstand on the beach. And I think about all the dreams that might have been deferred during my childhood because my mother was terrified of me ever doing gymnastics. And so I think about what a gift that I've given my children and encourage them, to enter a sport in which I don't have control of their safety, so that they can recognize and be attentive to their own mind and bodies in a way that I was never afforded an opportunity to. And I love this picture of my young son, Jude. He's about 3 in this picture, and he is so brave that at 3, he felt that he was brave enough to jump off the dune and into the arms of his father because he absolutely trusts that we would catch him. And so we might not have childhoods that looked like this, but we certainly have the power to provide childhoods like this for the next generation. So find your fierceness and pass that on. Find whatever gives you fire and pursue it relentlessly. Pursue it relentlessly. See yourself in that position in your mind. Daily affirm yourself and your journey. Embrace your wounds. Establish willingness and cultivate wonder throughout. Remember, nothing is final until the day we take our last breath. There is always a yet waiting for us. So in summary, from my own powerful collective story that I am courageously starting to embrace, the trauma of first sounds, like a really hard, it seems like it should be such a privilege to be in the first space, but it often does come with a very, very heavy weight on your shoulders, and it can produce a bit of trauma and feeling that you always are responsible for striving. So the trauma of first is really deeply rooted. So you need to attend to those wounds and harness a willingness to support others that come after you. Resist the urge to say, well, I had to do it this way. Gosh, wouldn't it have been wonderful if somebody would have provided you with a hand up and a help out? Why do we all have to go through it the same traumatic way? I commit myself to not doing that. And I love when my students of color say to me, can you please, Dr. Wilburn, sit with me? I have an academic goal, an academic inspiration, and I want to see it made possible. And I open every single door that I possibly can for them, because my story demands me of that, my story demands that I act that way. And so there's a huge responsibility, but yet privilege to be able to open doors for students that come from minoritized backgrounds. And really, any student that comes to me, I'm grateful to do that. But there is a special soft spot for children that felt like they could never achieve the impossible. Embrace your experience. Resist the urge to let it embody the whole you. It's only a part of you. Enjoy the wonder of the journey and step into your creation of your beauty. And that will be contagious. So would love for all of you to connect with me on the various channels. You can send me an email. I'm happy to share this PowerPoint with you. And I would love to field and entertain questions with this intimate group that we have here. So please, the floor is open.
Just so inspirational, Dr. Garcia Wilburn. Just loved everything you shared. I can relate to a lot of your story. It just really allows people to really truly feel comfortable, right? Hearing other people's story, and especially when you you can, no matter what culture you're from, I think we could still find something in your story that we can relate to. I would like to open the floor for our participants. If anybody would like to come off mute, please feel free to do so at this time, or if you want to use the chat, that feature is available to you as well. Comments, thoughts, feedback for Dr. Garcia Wilburn.
Hello, Victoria. I will just take 1 minute to thank you. I have listened to you in our summer summit, and I felt since then it wasn't enough because I felt there's so much more. And then since, your story brought so many emotions from the beginning to the end. It was really inspirational. You touched me, and I'm so glad for this center that this video will be on the YouTube channel. So I'm glad I will be able to share this with my friends, with my colleagues, with my younger cousins that will, I believe, appreciate to hear that. So yeah, that was really inspirational. And we all, I mean, even as I mentioned to the younger ones, but even the older ones, we need to hear this from time to time. So I really appreciate how well you brought it up to all of us.
Siva, thank you for sharing. And it is really my privilege to share my story with you. And I'm glad that there are so many parts of it that resonated. I think that just speaks to the universality that we all have as human beings, as living, breathing human beings, that we are all connected in humanity. And so I'm so thankful to hear that parts of my story resonated with you. And thank you for coming on today.
Dr. Garcia Wilburn, we have a question in the chat. What has been the most significant barrier in your career?
This most significant barrier in my career is not seeing enough women that look like me in my field. That has for certain been the biggest barrier. And so in order to overcome that, if you were in my first talk, I think you heard me talk about my scholarly sisterhood. So there is a group of 7 of us from around the country from various different institutions that meet together every Friday to support each other and to just be authentic and have a safe space that we can share stories and share struggles and share triumphs. And that, you know, I'm excited for the day when there is more representation in academia. And I'm grateful to play a small part in that and educating the next generation of healthcare providers.
Yes. Thank you. I definitely see that as being a Latina professor myself. There's just not, I didn't have any in my programs, in any of my programs, and on the campuses that I have taught, they don't exist.
Only 3%. Yes.
We have one from our friend Jerry. You mentioned wounds, willingness, and wonder. Would there be a place for appreciative inquiry that focuses on strengths alongside the wounds?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Jerry, because in those wounds has to have healing, right? We can't continue to pick open the scabs. So the healing has to be there, and that will become our strength. And so, you know, the concept of resiliency is a much debated one. Is it really resiliency or is it coping? And so I think, you know, having a strengths-based approach to not whatever trauma you might be facing does not always have a positive side to it, but we can come to a radical acceptance. And with that radical acceptance, we can move on to harness more strength from that experience. I don't know if that's helpful, Jerry. You're looking for more.
Jerry, you're on mute if you're talking.
Okay. Well, very good. Great question. Great, fantastic question.
Okay, it looks like we have a question from Aubrey.
How would you say we should begin to process trauma? Yes, that definitely requires, and I think I gave a plug for professional mental and behavioral health counseling. I absolutely would recommend a counselor who has some trauma-informed training in their belt. Not all childhood traumas are significant childhood traumas, but the ones that are should be addressed with somebody that has special training in trauma. But, you know, psychology, just as a form of wellness, counseling as a form of wellness is so vital. And I believe it's even more vital now than ever because of the demands of society, these fast-paced demands of society. And so having intentional time to pause and reflect, you know, we might need to really consider that as part of our wellness routine. And so, you know, I have been in counseling once a week since the pandemic. And that is something that I'm committed to preserving because it's just having that time to reflect on my thoughts and my thought patterns and, you know, the patterns that I display when I'm stressed, the patterns that I display when I'm very excited. And so just that awareness, because remember in the talk, I talked about changing systems starts with self. So if we want to change structures, it has to start here. And so I think that, you know, going and finding a counselor that you really, you know, really gel with is so important. So if you tried counseling before and it didn't work for you, please try again. There are so many providers out there. And now with incorporation of telehealth, you can find somebody across the country that you can meet with daily. So I would say that that process of processing your trauma does require some professional assistance. And we should all be stigma-free in approaching mental and behavioral health care.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's a great question, Aubrey. So the greatest lesson that I've had in running for office is an enormous sense of gratitude, an enormous sense of gratitude for the time that I did have, because now my time is filled up a lot. Oftentimes, you know, my calendar isn't my own anymore. And that's really what's required of being a public servant. You are serving the public if you're doing it right. And so I really have this enormous sense of gratitude for the life that I wish I didn't fill up so much before. I wish I would have not made so much of things that really could have had some nice boundaries. So coming on the other side of this, you know, election season will have an endpoint, win or lose. And so, you know, November 8th, having a very fierce recommitment to honoring and protecting my time. And so I'm really grateful to have learned that lesson. Let's see. And then I see a question coming from Crystal. How do you start to handle or overcome the negative stigma or harsh complex of Latina women or women of any culture succeeding in higher roles? I think that's a great question. And I think you have to be intentional about staying centered on yourself and your why, because there are going to be some people that will always question your motives. So succeed anyways, you know, build anyways, dream anyways, do it anyways, because it's not between you and whatever person is giving shade your way, right? It's between you and yourself. And so really reminding myself that when people start to, you know, make accusations, it's really a reflection of what's in their being. And I don't have to welcome that into my being, in my space. So the trolls have come out, but we don't feed the trolls.
Victoria, you're in a space where you, and I always like to recognize my privilege. I have a space of privilege being a faculty member. I have a lot more resources. What would you say to some of our younger professionals, our emerging leaders? How do you begin to network and surround yourself with that network of cheerleaders that you have been able to establish? Like, what would be some very first steps to maybe for somebody to get that going? Because I think having support is important, especially coming like first gen, right? Like I was a first gen student. None of my family understood the importance of college or more or less a PhD program, right? So who do you turn to? Like, so having this is going to be important for success. What would you say to some of our younger leaders, our emerging leaders?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. And I always feel like that's the answer people give, but it is so true. So the reason that I even belong to that sisterhood is that I was brave enough to ask if I could be included. I didn't know any of these women. We all just happenstancely were sat at a table together and we started talking. And somebody had said, I meet with so-and-so, one other woman at the table, they've been meeting for years. And I said, I want to join in on that meeting. And they were like, absolutely, we'll join. And then when I was brave enough to say I needed that, 2 other people at the table said they needed that too. So I'd say you have to just be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because if you don't ask for what you need, people won't know how to help you. So try to really be explicit. Speaking of privilege, I mean, absolutely, I come from a place of privilege to be able to even run for office, right? To have a schedule in which if when session starts, I don't have any teaching responsibilities. That's a huge privilege. But I'm not equal because I definitely don't have the money to be running, but I have the courage to ask. And so I think people can really want to get behind you when you say, I need help, because then they feel like they're part of the cause. And so that's part of this, is that you have to be aware of what you even need. And in order to be aware of what you need the time and the space and the peace to receive the messages.
Thank you. I think we have some more questions.
Aubrey says, who do you suggest that we encourage a team group of coworkers to feel comfortable sharing our stories together? How do you suggest? I think, feeling emotional safety is really intuitive. I think sometimes we don't feel safe. Sometimes we say, oh, that's just me. But you feel safety. You either feel safe or unsafe. And so if you feel safe with someone, start to go for lunch together one day, go grab coffee, talk to each other about other things maybe that aren't work, or talk about your projects, talk about your goals at work, and see how your messages, your vulnerability is received. Because remember, trust and vulnerability, they go hand in hand. And so friendship is contagious, and I'm really lucky to work with an amazing department where we really all cheer each other on and support each other. But that's intentional, and cultivating that positivity is intentional. And so no one ever leaves the office wing without saying, hey, I'm grabbing a cup of coffee, who wants to come? And if you don't want to come, can I get your order? And we just take care of each other in really simple ways. And if you can take care of each other in the simple ways, you'll show up in the bigger things. That's my advice.
And Monique asked a question. I'm not sure if we answered that, but.
Yeah, if you inquired about coaching within your organization but received no response, do you still continue to inquire? So actually my first mentor was outside of my department, because my department looks entirely different now than when I started. And so it's okay to step outside of your organization. You don't have to find a mentor within your organization. Sometimes it's better, because sometimes your organizations are the things that you want to get advice on. So my first mentor was a PhD in social work, and she was phenomenal. And she really, taught me all about community engaged research in a way that I had never been taught before. And so I think you should, if people aren't being receptive within your organization, throw it out there for somebody to coach you outside of it. So that takes, you need to get involved outside of your own wheelhouse too. So find a volunteer organization, or maybe at your church, or, at your children's school. There's so many just different connections that you might start to talk to people and think, oh, that person would have some value for me to learn from. So don't be afraid to look outside your organization for that.
Great. Any last questions?
This has been
Now's
so
your
great.
Chance.
Now's your chance. Yeah. But I just want to say, Krista,
look, she's gonna be in office, and she's gonna be very busy.
No, I'll always have time for this bunch.
We're claiming this victory.
Crystal, did you have a question with your hand up?
Yeah, actually. So I'm first gen, graduating from the University of Arizona on campus. And I have a 5-year-old son. So I'm just wondering, like, for your kids, like, what is it that you feel like is, either the most significant route to continue that legacy? Or is it just something, that you're willing to let them figure out on their own eventually?
Yeah, I think I definitely feel that, Crystal, because in getting my master's and doctorate, I had 3 children throughout the time period. So I understand all of that. Number one, I want you to say you did the best thing for your kiddo by finishing your degree. So congratulations. And they won't probably remember, because my kids don't remember me going through school. And I remember feeling so much mom guilt, like I'm not, they're not noticing, and they like don't remember. All they know is that I have given them, and I continue to give them opportunities to be who they are, even if I don't understand it. And I think, being a parent is so tricky, because it's this delicate balance of like boundaries, but yet freedom. And so, just try to create opportunities for your child to continue to wander, just to wonder about what life could be like, wonder about the next goal, wonder about what they want to be. I think my parents never made me feel like I couldn't attain anything. And that was the biggest gift they ever gave me. They always told me from day one, you can do anything you put your mind to. And it wasn't, you can do anything through hard work. It was, you can do anything you put your mind to. And so that was the message they told me throughout my whole life. And so I believed that if, I wanted to be an academician, I was going to pursue that relentlessly until it came to fruition. And so allow them to continue to be authentically themselves, and their purpose will be unveiled to them, and then give them the freedom to allow that to bloom.
Yeah, I think those words are amazing, just because my husband and I were actually talking about, growing up from a Hispanic background, that, that wasn't it for us. Like, we didn't know we could be an astronaut. We didn't know we could be, a pilot or a scientist. And so it's just great to be able to, put that in their head, that they can do whatever the heck they want when they grow up. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I think we'll close just really briefly with any advice on how to balance private and professional. It looks different in different seasons. It really does. So that's my biggest advice, Sevilla, is you have to do what's right for you in the season that you're in. And that season is always changing. So the balance that I had with my kids when they were much younger looked very different than the balance that I have with them now. And now I'm actually like begging to spend time with them. So, it eventually does. They eventually are so confident they feel like they don't need you anymore. And I'm like, hey, can we grab dinner? My Isabella is now 16 years old and looking at colleges for herself. And, I said, can we just grab dinner and reconnect? And she was like over the moon about that. So I think that balance just looks different for different seasons and different reasons. And it has to make sense to you.
Well, we thank you so much. You offered so much insight. It's so inspirational to see, a Latina woman in the spaces that you're in, doing all of the amazing things that you're doing and still giving back to us. So we so appreciate it. Just for those on the call, just an upcoming information about our community chat. We're going to talk about diversity and leadership on September 29th at 12 o'clock PT time. So register to get in there for that. We're going to have a lot of good conversation. This is going to be with our faculty, staff, our student clubs. So just a lot of good networking. These are great opportunities to network, see what's available so you can start, finding a mentor or different places for you to use your leadership skills. And then in October, we're going to kick off our Diversity Awareness Month, and we are going to focus with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the modern workplace, a disability perspective. I'm super excited to have Mason Metzger come on. He is a phenomenal leader, and he has cerebral palsy, and he's going to share his story about just really going through college and just trying to pursue a career with his disability. And he has such a phenomenal story. You don't want to miss it. So also, we are new to Instagram, so share, follow, get us some likes, or what you call, I don't know how you call that on Instagram, but we're on Instagram, Facebook, and our LinkedIn. That is the best way for you to stay connected. We post a lot of important information about what is going on in the community, as well as within our Center for Women's Leadership. So thank you all very much for joining us today. If there's any questions, please feel free to email myself or Aubrey, and we look forward to seeing you at our next events. Bye, everyone.